Okay. Now we're back on script. Our keynote speaker tonight is Ray Anderson, and others have called him a born-again environmentalist. He's an industrial engineer by training and is the founder, chairman, and chief operating officer of Interface, Inc., the largest commercial carpet manufacturer in the world. And he said, when asked how he got into the sustainability business, that it was actually reading Paul Hawken's book, The Ecology of Commerce, in 1994. Since then, Ray Anderson has taken steps to make Interface a sustainable corporation. And currently it practices in-house recycling, makes carpets from recycled soda bottles, and even recycles discarded carpets from other manufacturers. That must make them mad. However, unlike some corporations with green programs, Anderson admits that these steps are not enough, and he hopes to attain closed-loop recycling, which he may talk to us about, in which there will be no waste products at all or pollution produced. He's quickly become a world-renowned advocate for sustainable industry. In 1997, he was named co-chair of the President's Council on Sustainable Development. In 1999, he published the book Mid-Course Correction Toward a Sustainable Enterprise, the Interface Model. And he's just come out with a new book, September 15th, from St. Martin Press, called Confessions of a Radical Industrialist. And he will actually sign some copies for you tonight, later on. During his time at the conference, he will be available to talk with you about what he's written in his book. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Mr. Ray Anderson to come to the podium and speak to us about his work. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. That's a very generous introduction, and thank you for your leadership at Riverside, at ASHE, and in the larger academy. Good evening, folks. It's good to be back with the people of ASHE. Is this a great turnout or what? It's wonderful to see all of you here, and thank you so much for having me. I bring greetings from Atlanta and Georgia Tech. Anybody from Georgia Tech here? Yes, I'm here. Well, congratulations again to all of those who've just been recognized. Since my book entitled Confessions of a Radical Industrialist is just out, I do intend to draw from it and sketch a couple of themes from it in the time that's allotted here, and try to leave some time for questions at the end. But I'm kind of going to cross you up a bit by entitling these remarks, The Corporation of the Future, Reinventing the Industrial System. For that is very much what the book is about. And that is consistent also with your theme, Embracing Change. I want to begin with two well-known quotations from 47 years ago. Quote, "We stand now where two roads diverge, but unlike the roads in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. The road we've long been traveling is deceptively easy, but at its end lies disaster. The other fork of the road, the one less traveled by, offers our only chance to reach a destination that assures the preservation of the earth." End quote. Rachel Carson, Silent Spring, 1962. 25 years later, quote, "Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present generation without sacrificing future generations' ability to meet their needs." End quote. The Brundtland Commission of the United Nations, 1987, 22 years ago. This evening I hope to expand on the meaning of those two quotes, and I shall rely on the adage, form follows function, and ignore the form of the corporation of the future to concentrate on its function. So there won't be anything here about legal structure or governance or organizational issues. There's no attempt here to address the controversial issue of personhood of a corporation or the mischief that might have caused through the years. I do make one assumption, that capitalism will continue to set the framework within which the corporation of the future will function, though I suggest that capitalism is likely to have to adapt too. I'll concentrate my comments, as I did in the book, on corporations that make things, what they do and how they go about doing it. Furthermore, my focus is on the real economy, not on its rough analog, the financial markets with their various indexes. In other words, my focus is on the industrial system, of which we are each and every one a part. For this is where the greatest challenge to environmental sustainability lies. Contemplating the organization, the corporation of the future, one immediately is prompted to ask, well, what future? Not to suggest that there won't be a future, rather to suggest that the future stretches far into, well, the future. So the important question, the really important question is, what time horizon are we addressing when we say the future, whether it's in the title of these remarks or in the Brundtland Commission's definition of sustainable development? Indeed, what time horizon was the Brundtland Commission contemplating when it proffered its definition? Let me frame the macro issue as I see it this way. We individually and collectively, that is humankind, are an integral part of two interrelated, intimately coexisting global systems. Let us call one the technosphere. The other key component of the technosphere besides ourselves is the industrial system, the way we access raw materials and make and transport, use and discard things. Employing technologies across the full spectrum of technology, electrical, mechanical, petroleum, chemical, civil, aeronautical and space, environmental, construction, mining and metallurgical, textile, nuclear, agricultural, ceramic, automotive, biotechnological, as well as electronic and semiconductor technologies. The technosphere, we in the industrial system, coexist with the second global system, the biosphere. The biosphere consists of all the natural systems, the living systems and life support systems of the earth, the forests, the rivers, the oceans, the wetlands, the atmosphere, the ozone layer, the aquifers, the croplands, the grasslands, the hydrologic cycle, the carbon cycle, including photosynthesis, climate regulation, pollination, seed dispersal, flood and insect control, etc., and all of life on Earth, including us. So we have the technosphere, we have the biosphere, and we have this coexistence of the two within a thin spherical shell that is 8,000 miles in diameter, the diameter of the Earth, and about 10 miles thick, extending about 5 miles from sea level into the depths of the ocean, about 5 miles into the troposphere. Notice that we humans are the common element in both spheres, and relatively speaking, the thin shell is the thickness of saran wrap on a basketball-sized Earth. In this context, then, a good, perhaps better definition of sustainability might be the continued, healthy, balanced coexistence into the indefinite future of the technosphere and the biosphere within the thin shell. Another name for the biosphere, of course, is nature. Yet it's manifestly clear that today this coexistence is so unbalanced and so threatened that it is not healthy. Rachel Carson's Wrong Road. On a global scale, every living system is in decline. Biodiversity plummets. An extinction unprecedented in 65 million years is underway. The human footprint increases. The planet's carrying capacity for humans shrinks. The planet warms. The climate is disrupted. The weather goes nuts. Atlanta's never had 14 inches of rain in one day until today. The technosphere continues to expand at nature's expense as the economy worships at the near sacred shrine of growth. The question arises, how can this go on and on and on into the indefinite future? And the answer is clearly it cannot, unless we somehow miraculously find the earth to be infinite in its ability to supply the stuff demanded by the technosphere and to absorb the poison produced by the technosphere. This imbalance, this disequilibrium is a serious, serious problem that we are creating for ourselves, for our children, our grandchildren, and their grandchildren, and beyond. So how do we begin to reverse the negative trends, eliminate this problem, and bring these two systems, technosphere and nature, into harmonious balance in a way that will last 1,000 human generations, 10,000 human generations, that is to say, indefinitely? Let's be very, very clear, very clear. The longer we wait to get started in earnest, the greater will be the deficit that we and successive generations will have to overcome. Therefore, I'm addressing a time horizon that extends from now through a period of urgent, enormous, and essential transformation to a state of global equilibrium between biosphere and technosphere, in which the two will coexist in balance and harmony, meaning the technosphere will be taken from the biosphere no more than the biosphere can naturally and rapidly renew with energy input from the sun into the indefinite future. That is sustainability. So how does the technosphere, we in this industrial system of ours, move from its present state to that ideal end state of equilibrium and remain there into the distant future? Let's begin to answer that question by assessing just where the industrial system is now. For starters, our society, especially its industrial system, and essentially every corporation anywhere, is in the iron grip of Paul and Ann Ehrlich's environmental impact equation. I equal P times A times T, published in the Population Bomb 1997, in which I stands for environmental impact, a negative term. The bigger, the worse. P stands for population, A for affluence, and T for technology in its broadest sense, as I just described it. This equation says that the environmental impact or degradation is caused by people, the more the worse, what they consume in their affluence, the more the worse, and how all of that is produced, used, and disposed of. The more technology, the worse. So at the heart of the current and ongoing environmental decline is the take, make, waste industrial system, making and supplying the stuff we humans consume in our affluence and discard in our thoughtlessness. And technology, T, is a major part of the problem. So are affluence, A, and population, P. Population is a subject for another day, and I will make no effort to deal with it here, as I make no effort in the book. I'll get to affluence, though, before we finish. But first we must ask, what confines technology T to the numerator, where it contributes to the problem rather than to the solution? Why does T multiply negative impacts? And I suggest that this is because T in the numerator accurately represents the technologies of the first industrial revolution, call them T1, that we have grown up with and take for granted. Consequently, they are prevalent in our society and its industrial system, and they share some common attributes. They are extractive. They take from the earth. They are linear, take, make, waste, driven by energy from fossil fuels, wasteful, abusive, and focused on labor productivity, more of everything per man hour. So the Ehrlich equation could properly be modified to read I equal P times A times T1. I further suggest that the prevalence of T1 arises out of a flawed view of reality that underlies the industrial system, a paradigm that traces its roots to the earliest days of the Industrial Revolution, the early 18th century, when people were the limiting factor of production, and nature was bountiful, seemingly inexhaustible. It is a view of reality that assumes, or acts as if it assumes, that the earth is infinite in its ability to provide the stuff to feed the industrial system's metabolism, and infinite in its ability to absorb the system's waste, no matter how much, no matter how poisonous. Relevant time frames for considering the consequences of our individual decisions are very short, almost never beyond our own lifetimes, more likely not beyond our working lives. In business, long-range planning is maybe 5 years. In politics, the next election. Earth was made for humans to conquer and rule. Of course, Homo sapiens don't need those other species except for food and fiber and fuel and maybe shade on a hot summer day. Adam Smith's invisible hand of the market is an honest broker. Business exists to make a profit. The Milton Friedman school of thought. The route to abundance for all is through increasing labor productivity, more everything per man hour. It was natural enough to think this way in the 18th century when people were scarce and nature was bountiful. Why not use nature to enhance human productivity? It made perfect sense then, 300 years ago. Technology coupled with left-brain human intelligence, practical, pragmatic, numbers-driven, results-oriented, will see us through. Though the I equal P times A times T equation stands in defiant contravention of this assumption. There's more, but I think you probably get the drift. I suggest that the view of reality represented by these beliefs is deeply flawed, and it also underlies a flawed system of economics that begins by defining the basic economic problem as the gap between what we have and what we want. Not need, want. This is the first lesson of Economics 101. Economists tell us we can never close that gap. Whatever we have, we will always want more, and that gap drives all economic progress. It's also a system that worships at the shrine of growth, without due consideration for what should grow and what should not grow. And it is a system that ignores the externalities, the cost to society and innocent third parties that are inherent in so many of the transactions that it fosters, as it establishes prices solely on the basis of supply and demand without regard to true costs. This, of course, renders the invisible hand blind as a bat in its allocation of resources as it stumbles along in its blindness, ignoring the consequences of its actions that are represented by the externalities that it creates. When we stand back and look at this system and the mindset or the worldview that underlies it, we cannot avoid the inevitable conclusion. This system that takes from the earth whatever it wants to produce products that quickly end up in landfills and incinerators, think pollution, waste vast amounts of resources all along the way, and goes and does all of this with total indifference to societal costs, simply cannot go on and on and on and on. We humans cannot build a truly long-range future on this economic model. Its days of necessity are numbered because the industrial system that stems from this worldview is destroying the biosphere that undergirds the system itself. For you tell me, what company, what economy can survive without air, clean water, food, energy, materials, climate regulation, an ultraviolet radiation shield, pollination, seed dispersal, flood and insect control, water purification and distribution of the hydrologic cycle, nutrient cycling, photosynthesis, and more, all provided by nature. Without any of these, there would be very little economy at all. Nature truly is the goose that lays all the golden eggs. And like the goose in Jack and the Beanstalk, nature is being squeezed to death. The question for you, are you teaching the system? If this is the state in which we, the technosphere, the industrial system, and ourselves now find ourselves, where must we go from here and how? For starters, we must find a way to rewrite the Ehrlich impact equation, to break its iron grip and move technology to the denominator, I equal P times A divided by T. Then technology would reduce environmental impacts and become part of the solution rather than a major contributor to the problem. The mathematically minded will see it immediately. The bigger T becomes in the denominator, the smaller the environmental impacts become. But what must happen societally for such a transformation to occur? I suggest that the underlying mindset, the paradigm, the view of reality must change. The old flawed mindset born of the 18th century must be replaced by a new mindset that acknowledges that the earth is finite as a source and as a sink. We can see it from space. That is it. Relevant time frames for considering the consequences of our decisions are evolutionary in scale. We must grow up as a species and learn to think beyond our individual lifetimes and our trivial self-interests. Humankind was made for Earth, not the other way around. The Earth doesn't belong to us, we belong to it. And the diversity and vitality of nature are crucially important in keeping the whole web of life, including us, going sustainably over evolutionary time. The blind, invisible hand of the market is a dishonest, opportunistic broker. It will force any cost on society that an unwary or uncaring public will allow it to. It must constantly be redressed to keep it honest and give it sight. Business exists to make a profit? I beg to differ. Business makes a profit to exist, not the other way around. It must surely exist for some higher purpose, given its pervasive global reach and its power for good or evil. I don't know a CEO that really expects to stand before her or his maker someday and talk about shareholder value. Waste-free, benign, and focused on resource productivity, the efficient use of all resources, not just labor. These define the technologies that move T from the numerator to the denominator, I equal P times A divided by T2. This is the new test for the viability and suitability of technologies in a sustainable industrial system and in the corporation of the future. I wonder if you see how the T2 technologies emulate nature. How interesting. Biomimicry at work on a very large stage. These T2 technologies can also put people, no longer scarce but today an overly abundant resource, to work in ways that conserve nature, which is now the scarce and diminishing resource here in the 21st century. For surely the greatest moral, ethical, and practical challenge humankind and the economic and industrial systems face is lifting the poorest among us out of grinding poverty while simultaneously repairing an already badly damaged biosphere. Resource efficiency, the efficient use of all resource, is the route to abundance for all, for an indefinite future on a finite earth. As for intelligence, what about right brain intelligence? The subjective, the caring, the nurturing, the artistic side of intelligence. Perhaps it is a good bit more important than the left side, since it also represents the human spirit. Therefore, I say to you, the ascendancy of women in business, the professions, and government is one of the most encouraging of all trends, as women bring their right-brain, nurturing nature to bear on the seemingly intractable problems created by us left-brain men. So, if society adopts this new mindset, how does it then shape the corporation of the future? Indeed, the industrial system of the future that will survive and thrive as an integral component of a technosphere that is in harmony and balance with the biosphere into the indefinite future. Why, that sounds downright utopian. Is it even possible? Well, the answer to the latter question, is it possible, is found at the micro level. And the answer is yes, it is possible. As Amory Lovins, the founder and chief scientist of the Rocky Mountain Institute, often says, if something exists, it must be possible. I can quote Amory because as I speak here, I'm drawing from the real-life experiences of my company, Interface, and an example of what is coming into existence, what is proving to be possible. As for how, the answer's in the former question. The answer to the former question, the Interface experience is a result of a plan for achieving zero environmental footprint by the year 2020. This is the plan that is transforming a typical petro-intensive company for energy and materials of the 20th century into a prototypical sustainable company of the 21st century. And I suggest out of strong conviction that if Interface, given its petroleum-intensive nature, can do it, any company can. If any company can, it follows that every company can. That is to say, the entire industrial system can. Well, how did such a conviction originate? In 1994, inspired by Paul Hawkins' The Ecology of Commerce, I committed Interface, the company that I founded in 1973 to produce carpet tiles in America for the emerging office of the future, to the path to sustainability and to the plan for achieving it. 15 years ago, despite the enormous challenge inherent in such an ambitious commitment, we began at Interface where every company must begin, where we were. As part of a supply chain that took materials and energy, both fossil-derived, from the earth, produced our products in the linear take, make, waste processes, sold our products into a marketplace where they served their purpose typically for 10 to 20 years, and thence were relegated to landfills and incinerators, long since forgotten by us, their maker. We first created a schematic showing the linkages of our company to the earth, its biosphere, and its lithosphere, through our suppliers, our customers, the communities in which we operate, and directly through our own people, processes, and products. I won't bore you with the details of the schematic, but then we ask ourselves, what is wrong with this picture? We ask this question when very few, if any, companies anywhere were asking such a question of themselves. And out of that questioning came the plan for realizing a new vision for our company, to climb a high, high mountain clear to the top, that point at the summit symbolizing zero environmental impact. We call this mountain Mount Sustainability. The challenge is hugely daunting. The commitment to reach the summit must be equally unrelenting and unfaltering. The goal to operate our petro-intensive company so as to take from the earth only what the earth can naturally and rapidly renew, and to do no harm to the biosphere, to get off oil and get off coal. As we studied the mountain for fully a year, we identified 7 faces of Mount Sustainability, and we set out to climb each face to its own peak, to meet at the top, which symbolizes zero footprint, zero impact by 2020. We call this Mission Zero. The first face of the mountain is to eliminate waste, even the very concept of waste, emulating nature in our industrial processes. Biomimicry again. In nature there's no waste. One organism's waste is another's food. The cost avoided by this effort through 2008, some $405 million to date, have funded the entire mountain climb, rendering sustainability self-funding. The second phase of the mountain is to ensure benign emissions, totally benign emissions, working upstream with suppliers to establish screens that eliminate all the harmful materials, for whatever comes into our factories will go out as product or as solid waste or liquid effluent or gaseous emissions. We want to operate without smokestacks or effluent pipes, and for sure without toxics or greenhouse gases that contribute to climate disruption. The third phase of the mountain, to operate on 100% renewable energy, concentrating on energy efficiency first to drive energy usage to its irreducible minimum, and then harnessing renewable sources of energy or creating verifiable offsets to eliminate or neutralize our greenhouse gas contribution to global climate disruption. The fourth phase of the mountain is to close the loop on material flows, to capture precious energy-intensive hydrocarbon molecules after their first product life and give them life after life in cyclical flows. No more linear take, make, waste processes, with the cyclical processes too driven by renewable energy. The technologies did not exist 15 years ago when we began, but now they fall into place one by one. This is not a flavor of the month exercise. It is the commitment of a lifetime. The fifth phase of the mountain is to move people and products in pollution-free, resource-efficient, climate-neutral modes of transportation. The sixth phase is perhaps the most important of all. It calls for sensitizing stakeholders. This is the culture shift. This is changing the mindset that underlies our production system, and not just the mindset of our own people, but of suppliers, customers, and communities. Without such a shift in mindset, no lasting change will occur. Albert Einstein told us long ago, we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used to create them. Vitally necessary new thinking comes only out of a new mindset. Overcoming the status quo of we've always done it this way is hard, but it is essential. And it does not happen without a willingness to risk failure, but to learn from failure and try again. The seventh phase of the mountain is the redesign of commerce for the new economy, an economy that seeks to satisfy needs rather than wants, internalizes the externalities into prices, gets the prices right, and creates an honest-sided market. For many industrial companies like Interface, this will eventually translate into going to market with the services that our products provide rather than with the products themselves. Treating products as a means to an end, the end being satisfactory service delivered. For Interface, this translates into selling color and texture and design and comfort underfoot and acoustical control and cleanliness and ambiance and functionality, satisfying all the reasons for which anyone should want our products in the first place, while retaining ownership in the means of delivery. Parenthetically, a chapter of Confessions is devoted to each of the seven faces of the mountain, discussing how you actually do what I've just described. Success on all seven faces will result in an entirely new schematic. Again, I'll spare you the tedium of the schematic, but you can see there are no linkages to the lithosphere for raw materials and no linkages to the biosphere for waste and emissions. How is our real-life example doing? How far has it come in 15 years in this 26-year-long journey? The following 2008 ecometrics tell the story. Cumulative avoided waste, I've already mentioned the $405 million since 1994. 78% reduction in landfill waste per unit of production since 1996. Water intake down 74% per unit of production since 1996. Total energy down 44% per unit of production since 1996. Fossil fuel intensity reduced by 60%. Net greenhouse gases reduced 71% in absolute tonnage. Net greenhouse gas intensity relative to sales reduced by 82%. 28% of global energy is from renewable sources. 24% of total raw materials are recycled or bio-based. 100% renewable electricity in our European factories, 89% worldwide. 83 million square yards of climate-neutral carpet produced since 2003, climate-neutral from the wellhead to end-of-life reclamation. 87,500 tons of reclaimed product through our reentry effort, the reverse logistics. 191 million airline passenger miles offset by 98,000 trees. An overall footprint reduction of about 60%. In case you're wondering how a company can do all of this and not go broke, see the last two metrics. Sales over the same period up by 60% and profit, EBIT, earnings before interest and taxes, doubled. The business case is crystal clear. Let me lay it out for you in 4 parts. Costs are down, not up. Dispelling a myth, exposing the false choice between the economy and the environment. Products are the best they've ever been. Sustainable design is a wellspring of innovation, one of the great surprises in this journey, especially biomimicry. More on that later. Our people are galvanized around a shared higher purpose. You cannot beat it for bringing people together and for attracting the best people. And the goodwill of the marketplace, greater than any amount of advertising or marketing at any cost could have created. And believe me, we know this is earned every day by doing, not by talking. It is a better way. It is a better way to more legitimate profits, a better business model, better for the planet and better for the shareholder. But coming back to the macro case, what about the sacred shrine of growth? Moving toward a sustainable society, what should grow and what should not grow? Well, here are some thoughts. The lowest impact technologies, those that belong in the denominator, should grow. The abusive technologies, those that belong in the numerator, should shrink and eventually disappear. The sale of services should grow. The sale of products should shrink. Applied brain power should grow. Applied brute force should shrink. Market shares for the sustainable companies should grow. For the unsustainable companies, market shares should shrink to zero. At best, however, humanity faces a period of transition in which the equation will read I equal P times A times T1 divided by T2, where T1 represents the unsustainable technologies and T2 represents the sustainable technologies. Over time, T1 must give way to T2 until eventually only T2 is left. But can humanity realize a sustainable society, even if the entire industrial system eventually operates within the revised Ehrlich equations, I equal P times A divided by T? I think not. For affluence is still represented by capital A, suggesting that affluence is an end in itself, perhaps the end. This just seems entirely too consistent with the old definition of the basic economic problem, the gap between what we have and what we want. What if, however, Homo sapiens matured as a species to the point that the basic economic problem were redefined as the gap between what we have and what we need? What if that resulted from a reordering of priorities for individuals and societies so that affluence could be represented by a lowercase a, suggesting it's a means to an end rather than an end or the end in itself? And what if the true end we all seek, happiness, were injected into a further revised Ehrlich equation? It would then read I equal P times lowercase a divided by T2 times capital H. More happiness with less stuff. That would redefine not only the industrial system, but civilization itself, as well as capitalism, and would open up the real possibility for all human needs to be met through fair and efficient use of all resources, meeting the challenge to lift the 4 billion poorest among us out of grinding poverty while healing the already damaged biosphere. But can the corporation of the future that I have described survive and thrive among such a reoriented set of societal priorities? I suggest that only the corporation of the future, as I have described it, organized to meet needs sustainably, can survive in such a reordered world into an indefinite future. The typical corporation of the present will be the proverbial fish out of water and will surely suffer the same fate as that unfortunate fish. Environmental impacts must become vanishingly small if humans, even 7 generations from now, much less 10,000 generations from now, are to be born into a livable world. Yet one might ask, isn't there a chicken and an egg problem here? Will a transformed society drive the transformation of the industrial system, or will a transformed industrial system drive the transformation of society? And the answer is yes and yes. For the critical breakthrough mutation has already occurred. The chicken, the new species of company, is being born right now. So the two, society and its new industrial system, can co-evolve to a higher plane where equilibrium between technosphere and biosphere is achieved at last. That, I believe, will create the foundation of a new world order, as well as a sustainable, livable future for all generations to come. The last major variable, population, remains, but actually may not be as independent a variable as it seems in the equation. The forces that give rise to modified affluence and greater happiness, in particular the education of women around the world, may very well influence population to a lower peak level than the current United Nations projection of 9 billion people indicates. But as I said in the beginning, that's a discussion for another day. But back again to the micro level. Perhaps you're asking, what does this look like? On the factory floor and in the design studio, show me sustainability in action. Okay, come with me and see what sustainability looks like. Let me give you just 2 examples in the time that's left. A team of engineers, production personnel, and product designers collaborate to find another way to create patterned carpet. The conventional way employed for years by the factory and its chief competitors is to wet print patterns on a plain colored carpet base. Wet printing is water intensive and energy intensive, requiring an aqueous dye application, high energy steaming to fix the dye to the fiber, washing to remove excess unfixed dye, and energy-intensive drying to remove the wash water. Excess dye and wash water also require chemical treatment before release into the waterways. But new thinking, what Einstein said was called for, suggests that the tufting machine that forms the tile face of the carpet in the first place has untapped potential to precisely place tufts of yarn of selected colors to form quite intricate and more durable patterns. So the bold decision is made to burn the bridges and abandon wet printing altogether, to scrap the existing stranded investment. Left with only one means of creating patterns which the marketplace demands, development efforts result in entirely new families of patented inventions, giving the factory a proprietary edge rather than a handicap in its marketplace. One of those patented inventions arises, in the previous example there, arises from the outrageous, ridiculous assignment by the head of design to his design team to go into the forest and see how nature would design a floor covering. And don't come back with leaf designs, he says. That's not what I mean. Come back with nature's design principles. The head of design has read Biomimicry by Janine Benyus. Biomimicry, nature as teacher, nature as inspiration, nature as mentor and measure. So the design team spends the day studying the forest floor and the stream beds, and they come to realize there's total diversity here, even chaos. No 2 things are alike. No 2 sticks, no 2 stones, no 2 leaves, no 2 square meters of the forest floor. And yet there's a very pleasant orderliness in this chaos. So the designers go back to the design studio and design a carpet tile such that the face designs of no 2 tiles are identical. All are similar, but every one is different from every other one. Now, how contrary is this to the prevailing industrial paradigm that every mass-produced item must be the cookie cutter, same Six Sigma uniformity? The new product is introduced to the market with the name entropy, a scientific term associated with disorder. And in a year and a half, it moves to the top of the bestseller list faster than any other product ever has in the company's history. The advantages of breaking the old paradigm, this insistence on perfection and sameness, are surprisingly numerous. There's almost no waste, no off-quality in production. Inspectors cannot find defects among the deliberate imperfection. No 2 alike. The installer can install tiles very quickly without having to take the traditional care to get the pile nap running uniformly. The less uniform the installation, the better. So you can just take tiles out of the box the way they come and install them randomly. There's almost no scrap during installation. Even a piece tile can find a place in the installation. And then the user can replace an individual damaged tile without creating the sore thumb effect of a new tile placed among the old. That so typically happens with uniform precision perfection. Furthermore, there are no longer issues of dye lots. Dye lots merge indistinguishably, and this obviates the need for shelf stock, that inventory of extra tiles waiting on the shelf, waiting to be used, and the user can now even rotate carpet tiles on the floor to equalize, wear the way we do the tires on our automobiles and make selective replacement of damaged areas. All of this is good for the environment through resource efficiency. Nature, the inspiration, is anything but cookie-cutter uniform. She knows nothing about Six Sigma, yet she's very effective. Still, even with all of these unexpected benefits, one wonders, is there still more to explain the success of entropy? Well, perhaps there is. A speaker on the environmental speaking circuit begins every speech by having her audience close their eyes and picture in their mind's eye that ideal place of peace and repose and tranquility, serenity, creativity, comfort, their perfect comfort zone. We might try it here. Humor me. Everybody, close your eyes and picture in your mind's eye your ideal place of peace and repose, tranquility, serenity, creativity, your perfect comfort zone. Have you got it? Now lift your hand high if you're somewhere outdoors. Now look around. Look around. It's amazing. We humans gravitate, the vast majority of us gravitate to nature for that ideal comfort zone. And I think somehow entropy brings outdoors indoors in a subliminal way, and that is its real appeal. The quality has a name, biophilia. Coined by the great Harvard biologist Ed Wilson, there is enormous power in biomimicry and in biophilia. This is very new thinking. Einstein would be pleased. Today, a family of products, some 82 in all, are designed on the entropy principle and represent more than 40% of sales for the innovative and enterprising business. Sustainability in action. I'm out of time. Thank you all. You've been a terrific audience.
Yes, yes. We have time for a few questions and comments if someone would like to start. Yes, please.
Hi, Ray. My name's Leith Sharp. And
Where are you? Oh, there you are. Okay.
Yep, sorry,
Gotcha.
over here.
Okay, sorry.
I'm looking forward to entropy coming into our dress sense. The time we could save matching socks and whatnot would be handy.
One size fits all.
One size fits all, that's right. I wanted to go back to your equation, and from an industrialist perspective, T for technology, obviously it has to emphasize technology as in hardware, machinery, product from the industrial cycle, the technosphere. From our perspective, we live in a world in which our interface is decision-making. And we've existed for a very long time in a world where there are great technologies out there that are just not being chosen. They're not being introduced into our institutional settings at a fast enough rate. So what I was thinking was that technology should also be the technology of process, the technology of decision making, and that if that T were to relate to both areas of human invention, I just asked a colleague to look up the definition of technology on the iPhone technology, and turns out, yep, technology not only means the craft of the act of creating tools, but it can also mean the act of creating systems and decision-making frameworks. So I wanted to just bring that out a little bit, because I think, you know, for those of us, this is the relationship between the industrial complex and where we sit, which is in the decision-making world, where we need to reform the technology of decision-making process so that we can rapidly integrate and embrace the technology that the industrial...
Can I ask you, who is the we that you're talking about?
The we, higher education sector in this room for a start, but the we goes way beyond that to any organisational setting, to if we think about the industrial complex as the producer and we as the consumer. we need a new technology of decision-making, systems thinking, and integrated design processes and other things. So I just wanted to raise that point, because when we look at the evolved equation, if we think about the T as meaning technology both in terms of products and services coming to us from the marketplace, but also in terms of technology of decision-making, that we can be a part of innovating and evolving so that we can embrace the innovation that the market is offering, integrating it and feeding back improvements. And I wanted to get your reaction to that.
Yeah, I'd rather you be teaching the new technologies than the old, for starters. I expect your mechanical engineers are still learning about internal combustion engines. They need to be learned about fuel cells. I expect they're still learning about central power distribution, generating systems for electricity. They ought to be learning about distributed systems for capturing solar energy. I expect your ceramics engineers are still learning about the heat beat treat technologies that require 4,000 degrees Fahrenheit instead of studying the abalone that creates a better ceramic than any man-made ceramic and does it at 40 degrees temperature out of readily abundant minerals in the ocean. I expect the textile engineers are still learning to make what is the fiber? Not Teflon. What am I? Huh? Kevlar, the bulletproof stuff. Yeah, which requires boiling sulfuric acid. When the spider does it out of bugs at body temperature, it makes a better fiber than Kevlar. So there's a lot to be learned from nature, for starters, to be taught in the universities. And I would, for starters, rather see you start there. When I looked up the definition of technology, by the way, in the definition in the New Collegiate Dictionary, the word extract is part of the definition.
Well, I guess
which condemns
from the consumer end of it, from the end of the decision-making entities that are going to feast at the banquet of these new innovations and technologies, what we have right now is an inability to integrate those technologies and adapt. So, and it's a failure of decision-making process, because our decision-making process reflects the same paradigm that the technologies are coming from: linear decision-making, compartmentalized, separation of disciplines. So we need to evolve, we need to do the work at the consumer end of evolving our decision-making processes as a new technology of engagement, technologies of stakeholder engagement and decision-making, so that we can keep up with what the industry is offering us.
Yeah, it suits me if you lead. But I take your point, and keep the conversation going. That's what this is about.
Well, first I want to say thank you finally that when I was in business school, I heard about you, and your example inspired me and changed my life, really. So thank you for that. So I can't decide between two questions, so I'm going to ask you both. So the first question is, you talked about the corporation of the future. What kind of graduates would you want in the corporation of the future? Skills, knowledge, and values. And my second question is, on a day-to-day basis, how do you manage interface? As a manager, I mean, how do you clearly you manage interface with the skills and knowledge and values that you have, and how do you do that?
with great difficulty. Actually, I'm out of the direct management role now. I relinquished the CEO role years ago.
Or how did you? I won't let you get away with that.
How I did then was basically by example, leading by example, setting a clear vision, very clear vision, and articulating that consistently and persistently so that everybody understood where we were going and why, and then devoting the necessary time to the plan to get there. Exactly the things I talked about here. And then empowering people. You know, this has got to be pushed down into an organization all the way to the factory floor. And I will give you an example of what I mean by the factory floor. We've created this consulting arm of the company. We have companies coming to us all the time asking, how do you do this? So we created the capacity to respond, okay? And one of our very first clients was a multinational food company that sent 15 people to LaGrange, Georgia, to a carpet factory. There was one woman among the 15 people, and she did not want to be there. She did not understand why they were coming to Georgia. What could they possibly learn in a carpet factory? She was skeptical, belligerent, obstructive for the first half of the first morning, okay? And then comes the mid-morning break. And they went to a conference room out in the middle of the factory, so to get to the ladies' room, she had to actually walk through the factory and then back. And on her way back, she encountered a fork truck driver with a huge roll of carpet on his fork truck. And she stopped him. And she said, what do you do here? Kind of in that tone of voice. And so help me, he said, ma'am, I come to work every day to help save the earth. Well, it stunned her. So she started trying to draw him out, asking more questions. What do you mean? Da, 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 da. And after a couple of minutes, he said, ma'am, I don't want to be rude, but if I don't get this roll of carpet to that machine in the next minute, our waste and emissions are going out of control. I got to go. She came back to rejoined the meeting. The interface person who's running this meeting said she took a seat. Nobody knew this had happened. She took a seat, a visibly different person. She sat there very quietly. And then after a while, she began to challenge her people. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? And then she told the story on herself of her encounter on the factory floor. And she said, I've never seen anything like it, for the alignment from the very top of an organization clear to the factory floor. And there's only one word I can think of that describes it. Love. Well, there's a chapter in the book entitled Love on the Factory Floor. I hope you'll read that chapter because it is perhaps the most important chapter in the book because it deals with culture and the culture shift. So shaping a company's culture is not easy business. It takes commitment and persistence and you know what I'm saying, consistency for years. So thanks for your question. You had another question. I don't think.
Yeah. What kind of graduates would you?
Yeah. The ones I was just talking about for the technical people, and on top of that, biology. Biology is essential now. So engineers have got to learn biology too. Yes, ma'am.
So thank you for being the leader that you are in sustainability as a CEO. My question is, of course, you're an entrepreneur. You innovate, create, and capitalize. So in your lifetime, will Interface remove as its metrics of success profit and growth?
I hope it will be remembered as the pioneer of a new and better business model that combines all of that and does it for the Earth's benefit as well as the shareholder. This is what I want my grandchildren to remember. Yes. We are 47 years into the next industrial revolution. Rachel Carson started it. Okay? This is Rachel Carson's revolution. When we were 47 years into the first industrial revolution, Thomas Newcomen's revolution, the guy that invented the steam-driven pump to pump water out of the English coal mines so the coal miners could mine more coal, that launched the industrial revolution. When we were 47 years into that revolution, the cotton gin had not yet been invented. So it's really early days as industrial revolutions go.
Right.
The problem is we don't have the time that for this one to unfold. It has to happen much, much more quickly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So to that end, I wonder if you could maybe speak to some of the specific barriers that you're identifying elsewhere.
It's the mindset. I talked about it head on right here. It's the mindset that our culture whispers in our ear from the moment we are born. This is yours to take and use as you please. It's just not true. There's a flawed mindset that underlies the system, and people have a really hard time coming to grips with a new view of reality. They really do. So that's where it's at.
Thanks.
Thank you. And to follow what he was just saying, what would you say are kind of the two institutional acupuncture points to help facilitate the transition that you're leading the way and Rachel Carson started for the second industrial revolution? Are there the top two things that other people, educators, decision makers, government leaders could do?
Well, if you look at the government, the single thing the government could do that would have the greatest effect, in my opinion, is to begin to shift taxes from good things to bad things. Instead of taxing your income and mine, tax your pollution and mine. And that would change the world. And the second thing I would say, the power is with the people. In the marketplace as in the voting booth. Deepak Chopra has a way of saying people are doing the best they can, given their level of awareness. This is about level of awareness and raising levels of awareness. And for everybody, there's a higher level of awareness, even for Deepak Chopra himself. So those are the two things that come to mind. Yeah. If I thought a long time, I might come up with another one.
Thank you.
I've got a pre-question, which is Interface a publicly traded company?
Yes.
Okay. How much difficulty did you experience with convincing the board, but especially financial analysts, that this made sense? Yeah.
Our CFO, who is today our CEO, but at the time was the CFO, Dan Hendricks, had to deal with this, with the financial analyst in particular. And he would get the question, what's this costing you? But he was able always to answer, it's not costing us, it's saving us. Because we began attacking waste first. The low-hanging fruit, we got ahead of the cost curve. And to this day, we're still ahead of the cost curve. Even with all the process changes, the capital investments, the whole thing, we're way ahead of the cost curve. So being able to say that with a straight face to your investors was very important to us. In spite of that, he got grief, but we sold it on.
And do you think that, do your peers, obviously some are coming to you for trying to follow your example, but do you get the argument there's something different about the industry you're in, or where is are the points of disbelief that any company can do this, if a petroleum-intensive company like yours can?
I don't know the answer to the question. I don't know.
Okay, thanks.
This will be the last question.
Hi, my name's Ben Datema. I'm a student at the University of Missouri, and I have to preface my question by stating that I'm a student, so I'm here to learn and not to know. So if I'm on the wrong track, please let me know. It strikes me that you have a T1 in your equation, which is bad, and a T2, which is good. Is it possible that we could also have an I1, which is bad, and an I2, which is good, and that we have a negative impact but also a positive impact? And the point of our movement is to reduce our negative impact while improving our positive impact.
Yeah, you can play that equation a lot of different ways. It's not my equation to begin with. It's Paul and Ann Ehrlich's equation, and I didn't feel free to fiddle with what I meant. I is a negative term by definition. But I'm sure you can turn it around and make it a positive term and figure out what the restorative technologies, putting back more than we take and doing good for the earth, not just no harm.
Okay.
Yeah, good point. Thanks. Are we done? Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Let's give him another round of applause. Thank you all for being such a good audience, and if you'd like a book, you can meet us in the back of the room. Otherwise, we'll see you tomorrow morning, bright and early at 8 a.m. Thank you. Good night.